afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our session on cultivating and with all students in an online classroom. We know that relationships with our students are key to creating a positive classroom community, and knowing that many districts may start the fall in an online setting or in a hybrid setting, building those relationships with students will take some creativity, intentionality, and most importantly, time. I recently read an article on the importance of effective relationships with students, and in it, the author said that there's a growing body of research around this idea of a relationship gap. So the article mentioned that a small but significant group of students in our country are not experiencing developmental relationships with adults. So in fact, that means that these don't have a connection with anyone at school. A survey that was conducted by the Search Institute actually found that 1 in 5 reported no relationship with a caring adult at school at all. Knowing that this gap exists and knowing that relationships really help set students on a positive learning path, we need to intentionally carve out time to connect with each of our students to ensure that they feel connected in an online classroom community, just as we would do in a traditional face-to-face. As Sonia mentioned, we are recording these sessions and we're going to house them on the MySTEM website. We're also going to share the recording and any resources that we use today with you in class. So if you registered, you'll get an email from this for all of the resources and recording in a few days. We have a lot of digital ideas and strategies to share with you today. And we're going to get through it in an hour, but if you want to stay on, we are willing to stay on after 15 if you have some questions or want to learn some additional ways to do some of the things that Sonia is going to show us. So my name is Heather Rotterman, and I'm an assessment and instruction consultant with Wayne Risa. I'm joined today by colleagues, and I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Malik. I'm a math consultant at Wayne Risa. So nice to see familiar people.
And hello, my name is Nathan Spencer. I'm a science consultant here at Wayne Risa. Same sentiment. Glad to see everybody here. If we could, if you have the opportunity, if you could close your video off, it'll help us with bandwidth. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Ariana Curti. I am from Taylor Virtual Learning Academy. I'm a Spanish teacher and a mentor too.
Going to start with a sign-in, and Nathan is going to go ahead and put the sign-in in our chat. We are going to utilize the chat feature today quite a bit, so go ahead and keep an eye on that for future resources. We are asking that you do sign in though. The other reminder I'd like to ask is that you mute your mics. That'll help with the sound and the echoing sound that sometimes happens, but it also helps to save on that bandwidth. We are going to include a reflection and resource guide for you. These contain all of the links for things that we're going to show you today. So in case you can't get out of the chat, this will also be emailed to you. We're really going to focus on understanding connections with our students are important. And we're going to provide you with some strategies, ideas, and resources that you might use this fall to build your online community. We're going to experience a protocol today that's really geared for the math and science classrooms. So you can see how this can be done in your own classroom this fall. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to think of a silver lining. So think back to spring. What was the silver lining of moving to a virtual setting very quickly? What was surprisingly positive out of that situation? So if you would, go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat bar. So I'm seeing a lot of really, really good silver linings, spending more time with family, slowing down a bit, being more proficient with online digital tools. finding different ways to communicate with family members and friends, deepening relationships with students and friends and families and their families, having more time to rest and care for yourself. Yeah, it really did force us to slow down a bit, didn't it? So I'm going to invite, if you're not familiar with Zoom, if you click on the participants, if you double click on that, there's a little bar that'll show up that allows you to raise hand. It's a raise hand feature, and these are things that you can do with your own students if you're using the Zoom form. But would anybody like to share or expand a little bit on their thought about their silver lining?
Well, I can. I'm Aria Moody. One of the silver linings that I talked about was how some of my students who literally never wanted to talk in class, never wanted to do any group, anything, just anxiety every time you call their name, really started to shine when we moved to the online platform. And they so much better student than anybody ever thought they were before, because they were comfortable, they were relaxed, and they didn't feel the same pressures that they felt when they were in the class with so many children. My introverts got to be extroverts for a change, and they they got a chance to really enjoy themselves, and again, even I think prove to themselves that they could do a lot better than they thought they could.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So we're going to revisit this silver lining in a little bit, but continue to keep that in the forefront of your mind as we move forward. Our focus today, as we get ready to dive into the work, is to think about those experiences from this past spring. And regardless of our role in education, we were called upon to switch to our delivery model of instruction overnight, which in turn took many of us out of our comfort zones. As time moved forward and throughout the spring, we began to hear stories of teachers who were experiencing greater success in reaching out to and connecting with their students, while others may have found the task more daunting or challenging. And as I mentioned before, our hope today is really to provide you with some practical strategies, resources, and ideas that will assist you as you prepare to welcome your students back this fall. We know that plans are still being finalized in a lot of our districts, and some have been made very public. And if you are one of the lucky ones that you're able to welcome your students back in person this fall, you'll know how to develop those relationships, and you'll know how critical it is. But others may find themselves in the opposite position, where it may be a little more challenging to develop those relationships this fall. If we think back to our spring, we knew our students. We were able to spend fall through mid-spring with them. So we had those relationships. So it was easier in a way to shift virtually. We didn't have to reestablish those relationships in most cases. This time it's going to look a little different because we may or may not know the students that are entering our classrooms. So our work today is really going to be anchored in creating an equitable digital community. And we're going to do this through creating trust, ensuring our students are participating, and building respect. You will notice that that much of what we talk about is going to cross over into the different buckets, as you see on the screen. But our goal is really to create an equitable classroom that is safe, respectful places for our students to share. It's equitable, so everybody's ideas and participation is valued. We're going to support commitment, community, and learning together. And we're going to do this so that we can move math and science thinking forward as students work to figure things out. So as the assessment person, I love to pull in the research around why we want to do this. Learning is social. So if we think about Vygotsky to present day researchers, we know that research and studies support collaborative learning. And we also know that we need to take the time to build community within our classroom in order to ensure positive collaborations. So Hattie's research on effect sizes shows a 0.52 effect size around building relationships. And we know that based on his meta-analysis, that point 4 is his hinge point of things being worthwhile or something that we want to do in our classrooms. So we know that relationships impact student learning. So this brings us to a really low stakes type of group connector. Have you ever been in a class or had an experience with a teacher that you couldn't relate to or connect with? And what made it difficult? So I'm going to invite you to use the Padlet, and Nathan's going to pop that into the chat. And I'm going to open mine up. If you've never used a Padlet before, I'm going to model it for you. You can either double click on the background of the Padlet, or there's a little pink plus sign in the lower right-hand corner that you can add your answer to. So the question is, have you ever been in a class or had an experience with a teacher you couldn't connect with? And what made it difficult? We already have somebody that has popped their experience onto the Padlet. So what you'll notice about the Padlet is it allows you to populate lots of different things. If you've never used a Padlet before, this can be used in lots of different ways. I've used it with a book study group to curate resources for each of the chapters under each of the headings. But in this case, you can use it with your students to populate different ideas. You can have a question. So I'm noticing a few that no relationship, lack of trust, teacher seems cold.
Please, how can I access the Padlet, please?
Nathan, can you re-put that in the chat, please? I'm seeing a lot about not feeling comfortable asking questions, making you feel bad for asking questions, like the teacher didn't know me. These are great. So really, as I'm kind of scrolling through the Padlet, I'm noticing a couple different themes, that there's a lack of trust, a lack of development in the relationships, maybe materials or content wasn't engaging, maybe not a sense of community within the classroom, lack of respect, unclear expectations. Dive into our first bucket of creating trust. And I want you to kind of keep those bad connections in the forefront. We want to avoid those bad connections, right? We know how it felt to have to experience lack of connection or lack of engagement with a teacher. So how do we build that trusting community online? As we unpack our own experiences with a teacher, not having a connection with a teacher, we'd like you to think about a bit more deeply about the role that trust played in that relationship. So research clearly shows that through the eyes of our students, that teacher credibility, which includes competence, character, trustworthiness, and perceived caring, has a substantial impact or effect size on student learning outcomes. We know that from experience that building this culture of trust is a two-way street, and it might be more difficult to build and maintain in a virtual setting when you may or may not have the power of proximity and one-on-one conversations to help develop authentic and meaningful relationships. Additionally, building community between and among learners is essential to a class where high-quality teaching takes place. Doing this virtually can be done, but it has to be intentional and carried out in order for it to be successful. So I really like this quote from Stephen Covey, which speaks to the power of trust in all relationships. I think back to my days as a central office administrator, when I would often reflect on my relationship with my colleagues, with my secretary, with parents that I would interact with, and even students that I would interact with. Were there tough situations that would come about? Yes, there always are, and there always will be. The most successful outcomes were usually attributed to a solid bond of mutual trust between myself and the staff member or student or parent. So let's take a look at a few ways that we might build trust in a virtual environment. First is utilize that daily contact. How are we connecting with our students? I always say communicate, 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 both with our students and with our parents. Phone calls, emails, messages, using the LMS platform, whatever you're using, letters. These can go a long way to make sure that kids feel connected with their teachers and with their classroom. The second is to create and establish protocols within your classroom. So we want to think about how these can work together online. Think of the routines and procedures that you would teach in face-to-face setting. In essence, you're really doing the same thing here by establishing, defining, and then holding each other accountable for the way in which your class will function. The teachers who have had the most success with this will be the ones who are able to develop a level of trust within and throughout their class, so that students hold other students accountable for upholding the agreements. So we really want to work to build in, have established learning agreements and norms and protocols in place so that we can ensure that students feel safe within their classroom. At the end of the day, developing mutual trust helps reduce bullying. It builds that self-worth and self-efficacy that we want our students to have, and it builds connections among our students. Other students continue to crave the social interactions with their peers, and we will continue to hear from pediatricians and other leading medical personnel that this is essential to their overall well-being. And we know this as teachers, we know this. Establishing a trusting relationship and a safe online community where they feel a sense of belonging is essential for helping them to meet this essential need. So as a teacher or administrator, part of building credibility with your students is consistently showing that you care. A way of doing that is to be intentional about the way you check in with your students. We'd like you to take a time to reflect in small groups and identify some of the benefits of checking in with students. We'd also like you to share some ideas of the ways that either you've checked in the past or you might be thinking about checking in with your students moving forward. Also, how frequently did your check-ins occur in the spring? When we return, we're going to ask for a few volunteers to share your group's thinking. So I'm going to pop you into breakout rooms. Just a second. But if you've never experienced Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
You're about to talk about breakout rooms and
I think Nathan moved us quickly. That's okay. That's all right. So our question is, and he's putting, I think he's going to pop the question into the chat so we have it, but what are some of the benefits of checking in with our kiddos? What are some examples of creative ways that you've checked in with kids, or even how did you do it in the past? Oh, he did. He put my note in. So if you've never experienced a breakout room, they can be awkward. Yes, they can be awkward. So before we dive into the conversation, do a quick whip around of who we are, our position, and where we're at.
And Heather and I have already introduced ourselves. Elizabeth, do you want to start? You want to introduce real quick? You have to unmute.
I'm unmuted.
Oh, go ahead, Ingrid.
Gotcha.
Kindergarten teacher, Circle Elementary, DPS. That's it.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Carlson, 6th grade, Wayne Westland.
Hi, Diane Wardwell. I teach middle school science in DPS 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Woo, middle school.
Yes.
My people. Yay.
Yes, yes.
So what are some of the ways that you, the benefits of checking in with your students?
I really enjoyed checking in with my students. I did the phone call check-in first to all of them that I could manage to get to, and then email, virtual check-ins, and home visit. Kind of closer to the beginning, but kind of halfway through. I really like that one. I think I'm going to do that again. It was just really nice to touch base with them. I stayed on the porch, and I dropped off a bag of books and some other items. And they thought that was so cool to see their teacher there. Like some of them were just so giddy and laughing and nervous, but excited at the same time. I didn't have the amount of response that I would like to have had virtually. It was always, it seemed to be always the same core, 6 kids, you know, it didn't matter. They'd always be there. Sometimes some other ones would join in, and I had a couple that would join in. And if they didn't see a friend, they left. So that was kind of a bummer.
For us in DPS, I really liked the way that they kind of made our schedule where it was very consistent each day or every other day with our classes with our kids. And so even just seeing them online and you know, sometime we would do like movie days where I would show a movie like on my screen and then we would all do it together, or even just playing a game when it wasn't class time, or even just talking to each
That's
other.
so
Hey, what's
sweet.
going on? How's everybody in your family doing? You know, it really, I think, made them a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more, I don't want to, it's kind of funny. You would say homesick for school, you know, because we would still be able to see each other and just kind of, you know, be there for each other in a time where everybody was stuck in their own houses.
That's really nice, Diane. Ingrid, do you want to share anything?
All I can say, ladies, as a kindergarten teacher, we did not have anyone participate. It was 3 of us all together. And nobody showed, but we still continuously contact parents, still talk to my students. I would talk to them on the phone. I would talk to their parents on the phone via text or phone calls. But we had very low participation overall.
It's really sad, but I'm glad that you kept trying.
Yeah.
I think too, even, I think the unknown of the spring, I mean, my daughter was a 2nd grader, but the unknown of what was happening, I think that made it really scary. And I think I even found us as a, you know, even though I was working from home and she was doing the virtual school, like we even found ourselves like not participating as much.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just that unknown factor. We just didn't know anything about anything.
Never, something like this has never happened. So,
Right.
and then your kids are so young, Ingrid. I can't
Yes.
imagine. So much respect for kindergarten teachers.
Do you all remember time capsules?
Yes.
We used to make, I remember making one back like when I was in elementary school. It would be interesting to do a time capsule of like year 2020. I wonder what like kindergartners or middle schoolers would put in it.
That's a great idea.
Hi, Nathan.
Hello, sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm 1 minute left. I'm starting a broadcast right now.
Okay.
Okay.
I love his Bitmoji.
It looks just like him.
Do you guys feel better going into this school year? Do you feel a little bit like I'm a little bit more prepared because you experienced something like this in March?
Yes and no. I'm just so frustrated being in DPS with them still saying that some of our kids, you know, have to be face to face, and other it's just a mess in our district because some schools are even voting themselves now to either
Right.
be completely virtual. And I just wish that our superintendent would just actually take the lead and keep everybody safe, because the reality is our buildings are not safe. I mean, my building is 100 years old.
Mine is too.
You know, so we have no proper ventilation, stuff like that. So I just have complete, if we were all online with middle school, I would be fine. But saying that some of our people still have to be face to face just gives me such anxiety.
I'm sorry about that. Hope it gets better.
Welcome back, everyone. So what I was going to say before Nathan moved us into the breakout rooms is that sometimes breakout rooms, if you've never experienced them, can be awkward. You'll notice like I have my camera on now, but I didn't before because I was trying to save bandwidth. But when we move into breakout rooms, like sometimes it's nice to see faces so that you can engage in that. And that might be something that if you use breakout rooms with your students, you might encourage them to turn their cameras on. But that could be a norm or a protocol that you set up with your students, especially when you're working with trust. We had a really nice discussion in our breakout room. So thank you for the ladies that were in our room. But would anybody like to unmute themselves and share some of the ways that you checked in with students or what you're thinking about maybe for this fall?
Okay, hello, how you doing? This is Mr. Barlow. We talked about how we checked in. I would do we do emails or video or chats to the chat line on Teams, and also I had Class Dojo, so I had most of my parents in my phone already, so I would contact them that way through the text messages. And sometimes I would do house calls, like if they didn't have homework packets, I would take it to their house, so that they would have all the books and materials, so like home visit.
Those are all great strategies. And if you think about like what we were asked to do this spring, we really had to shift in a way that is it's incredible how we had to shift and we made it work, right? Like if you think about, like I kind of compare this to like a dentist or a hygienist. Like they're going back to work and they're doing their work in a way that they just may have a little bit more, protection or protocols in place. But our work at teaching has completely shifted. So this is very different and very uncharted territory. And we know how important those relationships and connections with students are. Would anyone just share what they discussed in their breakout room? I love seeing all your faces too, by the way.
I'm Cheryl. I work with middle school students. I use Instagram to connect with my kids because they, like I said, most of them have it. So I was on Instagram a lot. And then for people who didn't, we use Google Classrooms, and we also had Google Voice for like phone calls home. But mostly through Instagram. That was like the best way I got to everybody. Because I was tagging them in everything.
Yeah, we had to create a phone number too, like a Google phone number, so we can call them instead of using our regular phone number.
Yeah.
So I could share if that's okay.
Absolutely.
We had a lot of different ideas, but the assistant principal, I think at Wayne, Mr. Justin Trumbaka, and a bunch of other people thought this was a good idea. He said something about feeling like we're in people's house more and maybe having an even better connection with some of the families at the very least. And so I brought up that I did karaoke at the end of the hour, and you screen the songs, take their suggestions, screen the songs. And then I had like family members just jumping in, old school Motown, really good, fun songs. And they know them. They know those. They know their jam. So we all just laugh because I'm terrible. And we have a good time with it. And so that brings in more people, and the kids really loved it.
What a great idea. I love Instagram. I've never heard of the Instagram. I mean, I'm a former middle school teacher, but I love that. They know that platform. I think that's fantastic. I love the house calls that teachers are making. Like you're actually going and being safe, but like you're seeing, the students. And then I love the karaoke idea. These are such great ideas to connect. I love it. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to share my screen again. Give me 1 second. So we're going to talk a lot now about establishing that equitable digital community. And we know that the classroom itself is really one of the most important factors that impacts student learning. We know this. Research indicates it. They say that students learn better when they view the learning environment as positive and supportive. A positive environment is one where students feel a sense of belonging, trust others, and then they feel encouraged to tackle challenges, take risks, and ask questions. This type of environment really provides relevant content, their learning intentions or learning targets and feedback, opportunities to build those social skills, and students succeed. We saw this spring was really like, we were really working on Maslow, right? We were really working to make sure that students' physiological needs, that food with all those food drop-offs, the food distributions, making sure that students had, if they needed internet assistance or rental assistance or housing assistance, like we were really working to make sure that students had those bottom 3 rungs, right? Because we knew that if students did not have any of that met, that learning was going to be really hard or maybe even non-existent. So that was the first thing that we saw this spring. Schools really, all of our schools in Wayne County really worked hard and did an amazing job of making sure that students felt their physiological needs were met, they were safe, but then they were really working to get that belonging, right? We also know that we tend to bond with people and institutions like schools that help us to satisfy our needs, which makes the creation of a caring, inclusive community for our students especially important. When a school is able to meet the basic needs, students become increasingly committed to the school's norms or classroom norms, values, and goals. And by enlisting our students and maintaining that sense of community, because we need their help too, the school or the classroom really provides opportunities for students to learn skills and develop habits that can transcend throughout their life. So this is really, really, really important that we really think about how do we make sure that our students' basic needs are met so that they can be successful learners. I'm going to stop share and I'm going to let Sonia take over.
Hi everyone, this is Sonia again. You know, Heather, Nathan, and I see so many people that we've been working with for the past few years, and teachers that have transformed their science and math classrooms where students feel included and are positioned as knowers and doers of science and mathematics. Norms are critical for making that happen. So we're trying to support student agency through the development of norms. And we know that you have been working so hard to create inclusive and equitable environments in your classrooms. But we're here today to discuss how to establish that in a synchronous virtual environment. It might seem like to you, first year of teaching all over again. And one of the ways, you know, that we can support students in these transformed classrooms that we have been working towards is for students and teachers to work together and co-construct a set of norms that make students the knowledge constructors of classrooms. So we're really shifting powers from teachers to students using these norms. So students are just passive receptors of information, but are actively involved in building ideas and building the class's understanding. So what we're going to do, I'm going to share my screen now. So we're actually going to do a simulation activity. You're going to take on the role of learners. I'm going to take on the role of a teacher. So I'm going to take my facilitator hat off soon and put on my teacher hat. I'm going to attempt to model how to co-construct norms in a synchronous virtual environment. Please note, because of time, some of the construction of norms was already done prior to this meeting. But if I was really in a classroom with children, I would spend more time on constructing these norms with the kids. So in a little bit, you will take on a role of a learner. You're going to experience constructing norms in a synchronous environment. Then you're going to experience a short math routine to practice the norms that we have established. And then we're going to get a chance to reflect on our norms, and you're going to give me feedback on how the norms went and if there needs to be any adjustment. So in a little bit, you're going, well, actually, let me show you what the norms look like. So in this Padlet right here, you see the face-to-face norms. that I have used in my classroom for years. And the norms I have posted on this Padlet are organized in 4 different categories: respectfulness, equity, commitment to our community, and just moving our science and math thinking forward. In a little bit, you're going to be taken to a breakout room. There's going to be 3 breakout rooms. Nathan and I are going to lead that conversation about how to co-construct. We're going to co-construct the norms together and be a part of this experience. So just like before, you're going to be invited to join a breakout room. Nathan, whenever you're ready. Hi everyone, I'm going to turn my camera on now that we're in breakout room. All right, so remember, you're taking the role of a learner as I put my teacher hat on and as we co-construct these norms. All right, so let me show you the norms that I have right now. Now, these are norms that I've used for so many years in my classroom. I'm going to give you a moment to read these norms, or I can read them if you have a hard time seeing them. So the purple category is all of these norms are just for being respectful, so our classroom feels safe space to share. We have, we build each other up by providing support and encouragement. We critique the ideas we are working with, but not the people we are working with. And then the norms in blue, they relate to equity. We're making sure that everyone's participations and ideas are valuable. So the norms that we have here are that we encourage other voices who we haven't heard from. We recognize and value that people think, share, and represent their ideas in different ways. And we give people time to think. The norms in green are related to being just a community of learners, that we all collectively learn together and support each other. So this one talks about we step up to share our own thinking to help us all learn. We listen carefully and ask questions to help us understand what others mean. And we speak clearly and loud enough so everyone can hear. The norms in the yellow are related to our math and science thinking and moving it forward. So the first one is talking about using and building on other people's ideas. And then the second one on the bottom is we back up our ideas with evidence or reasoning and ask for evidence or reasoning from others. Now, these norms are norms that we follow when we're together in a classroom face-to-face, but we're not together in a face-to-face setting anymore. And so what we need to do is we need to adjust these norms so we can abide by them in our Zoom synchronous session. So let me show you how we're going to do that. So if you look at the yellow column, this norm has already been adjusted. We use and build on other people's ideas. So when somebody else is speaking, sharing their science or math thinking, we can use the chat feature to add on to someone's thinking. Or we can unmute and say, I would like to add on to Justina's thinking. So do you see how we adjusted this norm in order to be successful for Zoom? So our group is going to be looking at the norms in the green section. But let's look at this norm right here. We step up to share our own thinking to help us all learn. So I want you to think about that one. So this one is saying that you are going to participate. So think about the features in Zoom that we have right now. And some of you might be more familiar with Zoom. How can we show everybody in our class that we want to speak or we are willing to talk? What are some signals that we can give? Justina, did you want to say something?
We could use the raise your hand button in Zoom, or you can have them like we did, have the chat for if you want to add or make a suggestion. That way everyone.
So I see, so Justina, I hear you saying that we can use the digital raise hand feature, right? And then you said that also chat is another way that we can speak up. Absolutely. Another thing that I've noticed that that you did is that you unmuted yourself. You think that can be a signal for the rest of the class?
It can. We used it in our Google Meets, but sometimes in unmuting, there's the person speaking or they're not really paying attention to the mute. So we had a second teacher in the room who would notice those things and notify, hey, someone unmuted or someone raised their hand. So we
Okay,
also
so
did have somebody else in that kind of checks
how about I say this? Unmuting could be a signal, but if you do it in gallery view, you can kind of see everybody at a glance, and that's gonna help you see who has unmuted. Or maybe if you, when you hit participants, then you can see who has unmuted. That's a great, thank you for sharing that. So see, that's how we adjusted this norm. Now let's look at this one. We listen carefully and ask questions to help us understand what others need. So Justina was kind enough to share. Can somebody else share like how we can adjust this one? Like how can we show people that we're listening to them? And how can we ask questions while somebody else is speaking?
Well, what I do is that when a child shares on the whatever platform, after that child shares, I will randomly select someone and say, Thomas, do you think you could explain to me what Cheryl meant? Did she mean this? And then they can engage in some type of conversation.
Oh, that's great. I was putting in the wrong box. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Is it Haley?
Yes.
Haley, that's a great idea. So ask someone to repeat the speaker's thinking. That's excellent. Right, so the next one is also important. This one is we speak clearly and loud enough so everyone can hear. So I'm gonna tell you there's one issue that comes up sometimes. Sometimes the internet is unstable and the audio is not working well. What can those kids do? Like what can we do? If that happens, if I call on Cheryl, for example, and her audio is not working, what can she do to still express her voice?
Use the
Elizabeth?
chat box.
Yes.
She could use the chat box.
Yes, use the chat box. Okay, so let me type that in. So we're about to leave. Oh, somebody already did that for us. All right, so I'm just gonna, let's look at, so I think we've established some protocols that we're gonna use. We're going to make sure that we use the hand raise option and use the chat when we want to actively speak. Also, if we haven't heard from other people, if we haven't heard other voices and two people have unmuted, then we're going to step back, allow that other person to share their thinking and their ideas. I think this one is important. We're going to give people thumbs up or use the chat feature to encourage people that are speaking and to support them. So that's another thing that we can do. All right, so I know I had great discussion in my group on how to adjust these norms. So we're actually going to practice these norms in our class today, in our session today, using a math routine. But before we get started, I just want to review some of the things that we agreed upon. So to build each other up by providing support and encouragement. So if someone is speaking, we can encourage them by giving them a thumbs up, putting emojis, putting appropriate comments in chat. When we're critiquing ideas, remember we're critiquing ideas, not people. We're gonna model ways to respectfully do that. Maybe we can use sentence stems. We need to encourage other voices who we haven't heard from. And so if we have unmuted and another person has unmuted, then maybe we're going to allow the person who hasn't spoken up yet to speak. Also, when we share our thinking, our group decided We can do that by using the digital raise hand feature and unmuting our mic signal that we're ready to speak. We're going to listen carefully to others, and in order to listen carefully, we thought that it might be helpful to repeat the speaker's ideas. So these are the norms that we're going to follow as we engage in the short math routine. Can you please give me a thumbs up or type in agree in chat to let me know that you agree with these norms and we're ready to move forward with our math activity? Thank you everyone for agreeing. All right, so before we begin, I want to go over your rights as a learner. You have the right to feel confused. Confusion is a part of a learning process. You have the right to claim a mistake. Our brains grow when we make a mistake, and it's a learning opportunity for all of us. You have the right to speak, listen, and be heard. You have the right to write, do, and represent only what makes sense to you. And you have the right to feel safe and respected. We're going to do a short number talk routine that we recommend in Wayne Risa. In fact, it's recommended at the state level also. And so it really promotes number sense and procedural fluency. So I'm going to pose a problem to you, and it's actually going to be an image. I'm going to show you an image and ask you a question about it. You're going to think of ways to solve the problem mentally. I'm going to give you some think time to solve it mentally. So that means no papers, no pencils. While you're waiting during this wait time, I want you to think of other ways to solve the problem. Then I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to give you a signal. Once I give you a signal, you're going to enter the answer in chat. All answers will be collected, but only a few of you will be selected to defend your answer. And then we will collectively agree on the correct answer. So remember, we're going to try out the norms that we talked about using this math routine. So I'm going to show you an image only for a few seconds. And the question that goes with the image is this one. How many square tiles are in the border of a 10 by 10 grid? How do you know? I'm only going to show it to you for a few seconds, and please keep your answers and your strategies to yourself, and don't put anything in chat. Again, the question was, how many square tiles are in the border of a 10 by 10 grid? So I'm going to give you some think time. Hold on for your answers, yeah, because you have not received the signal to submit the answers. We still need some wait time. All right, so now I want you to use the chat feature to enter in your answer, please. How many square tiles were in the border of a 10 by 10 grid? All right, so right now you're just sharing your answer and not your strategy. So I just want to be clear that you're sharing your answer. So for the sake of time, I see 3 answers that are coming up. I see 40, I see 100, and I see 36. Those are the most popular answer choices that I've seen so far. So I want you to take a moment right now, and I want you to think, well, how would someone get 100? Or how would someone get 36? Or how would someone get 40 to the question I posed? So I want you to think about that right now. Like, how can someone come up with that 40 or the 36 or or 100? So think about that for now. All right, so we're going to talk about those three answers, 36, 40, or 100. And I'm going to remember the norms that we discussed. I'm going to ask a few of you to defend your answers. And so if you selected 40, or if you think you know why someone would have selected 40 as the answer, can you please raise your digital hand to let me know that you're willing to share your thinking? All right, so we see that Arya is willing to share her thinking. Arya, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes.
Okay, so give me 1 second so I can set up my dot cam. All right, Arya, so go ahead and explain your thinking to me.
Well, I would think it said it was a 10 by 10 border. So border means, in my mind, it means all the way around. And so
Okay.
if you think that it's a square and it's 4 sides to a square and each side has 10, then 4 times 10 would be 40.
All right, so you were thinking this is a 10 by 10 grid, and each sides are going to be equal, and we'll have 10 all the way around. And then you said that you found the total, like your strategy for finding the total was 4 times 10 equals 40. Am I correct in that, Arya?
Yes.
All right, so I want someone to just repeat her thinking. Who can unmute and just repeat what Arya said? So you're just repeating right now her thinking.
Okay, Arya said that she was thinking about this in terms of it being first of all, that it was a border and it was a 10 by 10 grid. So then if each side had 10 squares and each square has 4 sides, that's how she came up with 4 times 10 to equal 40 squares.
Thank you, Christine. Arya, did she do a good job of explaining your thinking?
Yes.
All right, now for the rest of the class, I have a question. I want you to think about Arya's thinking and what questions or comments do you have for her? So what questions do you have for Arya, or what comments do you have for her? Please feel free to unmute. And Nathan, actually, Jennifer, I'm going to have you share in a second. Nathan, can you please put the sentence stems in chat if you haven't already? Because we can use these sentence stems to engage in some dialogue around each other's strategies. All right, so Jennifer, I'm going to have you go ahead. What questions or comments do you have for Arya?
My question would simply be, do you believe your answer is correct, and why?
Go ahead, Arya.
Okay. Well, at first I did think it was correct, but now I don't.
So are you revising your thinking now, Arya?
I now that I am looking at the picture, I think I have to.
Okay, can you share how you're revising your thinking?
Well, because it's 4 places in the border that have the same square, so you have to subtract 4 from 40, so because otherwise you'd be counting them twice. So you would count each corner twice.
So you're saying you have to subtract 4 from 40, and because you said that some So there's some squares that are tiles that are being shared. Can someone else explain why she subtracted 4? Why did she subtract?
I think she said, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you can go.
I think she subtracted the 4 because if we look at it from, let's just say the bottom row and one of the sides, they share a corner block.
So the bottom row right here, are you talking about this corner right there?
Yes.
And then how many corners do we have?
We have 4 corners.
So we have 4 corners right here. Aria, is that correct? Is that what you were trying to say?
Yes.
So it's interesting, Aria, you actually helped us see, that when we are looking at these types of problems, we really have to look at the corners because the square tile is being shared. Like, we have to really pay attention to that. So it's because of Aria that we now know to pay attention to that. Can others in chat maybe write down if you did something similar as Aria? Maybe just acknowledge that in chat so she knows that others were thinking in a similar way. All right, I know that we're running a little bit over time, so I'm gonna have one more person share their thinking. How about somebody who got 36 initially? How did you count
Okay. Yeah.
square tiles on the border?
Okay, that.
And who is this speaking?
Barbara.
What's your name again?
Barbara Hudson.
Barbara. Okay, go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah. So when I was thinking about it, I realized that the vertical distances on the sides had 10 tiles.
Okay. So like all of this is 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right here is 10.
Yes. So then the distances horizontally would have 8 left.
The bottom 2?
The bottom as well.
Okay. And then what was your strategy?
And then I just added those, the sum of those sides.
And how did you add them?
I said 10 plus 10 and 8 plus 8, so 20 plus 16.
And then what did you do?
And then I added that partial sum to get the total sum, which was 36.
Get 36. Okay. Who can explain Barbara's, actually repeat Barbara's thinking? Please unmute or raise your hand.
Let me try.
Go ahead. And what's your name?
I'm Carol.
Hi, Carol. Go ahead. Can you please repeat her thinking?
What she's saying is that if you look at, first of all, I have to commend the first person because she was observant to know the number of tabs that surrounded the squares.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was thinking there were about 2, squares outside, but no. But going back to Barbara looked at, from what she's saying, she did it the easy way, which is taking the 2 sides, the parallel sides together, taking it up from top down, that gave her 20 squares. And then taking this middle part, that is 8 times 2 to give her 16. And adding it up, it gave 36.
So I heard you say, Carol, I think Barbara, she did a really nice job of repeating.
Yes.
And so one thing that Carol added was that Barbara did 2 times 8 and 2 times 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so can someone else explain why that would work also, like 2 times 10 and 2 times 8? Why would that?
Because she has 2 groups of 10 and she has 2 groups of 8.
Thank you.
Two 10s on the left and right, 2 8s on the top and bottom.
All right, so what Sherry is saying that there are 2 groups of 8 on the top and then 2 groups of 10 right here. So I want you to think about now, I'm gonna actually stop sharing my screen. And I want you to think about, I want you to think about why someone would have gotten 100. Why someone would have gotten 100. So it doesn't even have to be the person who got 100 who speaks up. Like,
because I assumed you wanted the whole area, the area of the square. I didn't
yes.
question correctly.
So then it was the direction, right? So many people,
yes.
Or quite a few people who agree with you. I see that in chat that they also wrote 100. So I want you to think about right now, like we saw a couple of strategies that were shared. So I want you to think about, you know, what if I gave you another squared grid, like a 6 by 6?
Sonia, can I jump in and ask a question that a student might have?
Yeah, go ahead.
When we looked at Barbara's in comparison to Aria used the language that because it's a square, all sides are equal, and that's why she came up with 10 on all sides. But when I looked at Barbara's drawing, it looked like this would have to be a rectangle. What if you had a student to ask you that?
Yeah, so how would we respond to that? Like, what do you guys think about what Lisa has just mentioned?
Can I make a response to that?
Go ahead. And I'll share my screen again just so my dot cam so you can see what Lisa was referring to. Go ahead.
So when I looked at the picture and was thinking 10 by 10, and then I thought about what Aria had said, that the squares on the corners were shared by multiple columns. In order for it, in my mind, to still be a square, I thought if each side only gets one corner to itself, then that would make 9. And then the next vertical side would actually pick up at that corner that didn't get used by the top horizontal, and it would be 9 down. And then the corner at the bottom right would pick up for the next side, and it would be 9 across.
So are you thinking of it like this right here?
Yes.
9 this way, and then 9. So you're leaving one corner every single time?
Off. Yes.
One off.
Yes.
So another 9
yes.
right here.
Yes.
And then this would be like the final 9. So how many do you have?
4 groups of 9.
4 groups of 9.
And Sonia, that's the part that I wanted to pick up on, because we don't want to confuse students into thinking that a square does not have all equal sides, but the way that, and I'm not sure who was just speaking.
It was Nicole.
The way Nicole just explained it to me would make it more accurate for students, that they could see that, yes, this is a square by definition, and here's why. I just wanted to catch that.
No problem.
Right, and it would definitely make it more clear than the way I explained it when I said that I would have to take off 4 corners because each corner is being counted twice. So when Nicole said it that way, it shows the kids exactly what I was trying to explain, but didn't quite have the language to, couldn't think of the words at the time to actually say that.
See, that's the beauty of creating a community of learners. I hope you really felt like right now in this moment, I mean, with the lack of time that we have, that you felt like you were in a collective community where others were supporting your thinking and our ideas were building upon each other. And so Aria, I would like to honor your strategy and say that this is a great strategy of, you know, like your strategy was valued. And Barbara's was valued and Nicole's was valued as well. But as these strategies are shared, like we're building on ideas from each other's ideas and just having a collective learning experience. So I hope that all of you felt that. I know that we're really short on time, right, Nathan and Heather? I know that there's some of you that are willing to stay, which is great. I just want to kind of wrap this conversation up. and take a moment to just reflect on the norms that we establish in this synchronous environment. And this is something, you know, that you would also want to do with students. And this was our first time like doing a math routine together collectively, a large group of people. And so we kind of tried out our norms. So I want you to think about right now, which norms worked really well, you know, which norms we revise, and should there be other norms that are added in this environment? So Heather and Nathan, what do you think we should do? Should we do the breakout rooms? I'm looking at the time. I know there's still some people here that are willing to stay. What do you guys think? Heather?
My recommendation so that you go through, you show them the process by sharing your screen, but not doing breakout rooms, and talk about how students can be engaged with this.
Okay, perfect. All right, so here's the Padlet again. And so one nice feature of Padlet is that you can actually rate the norms. And so, for example, for sharing our thinking, like right here, so we can add comments and add like a star value. For some reason, I can't do that right now. Oh, it's because I'm annotating maybe. But okay, so no, it's not working right now, but there's a system that you can apply like with the 5 stars. Kids can actually add comments also. So that's how you can, you know, just revise the norms after experiencing a routine. You can stay on the call and we can talk more about that whole process later. And Nathan is going to put this resource in the chat box. So this experience of co-constructing norms, I got this idea from OpenSciEd. OpenSciEd has wonderful resources on setting norms. And so if you look at this document on your own time, it also talks about setting norms in an asynchronous environment as well. One thing I want to mention about norms is that we need to continue to revisit them on a regular basis with children. And, you know, just like anchor charts that you use in your classroom, you can create slides with norms to maintain that expectation in a virtual or remote setting. So it's really important that you keep revisiting the norms on a regular basis after you do the routine. So it's really important that norms are not done in isolation. Like you're giving the kids a chance to practice these norms as you're introducing routines and content in your classroom. Last piece that I'm going to quickly touch upon is building respect, or a climate of respect. That's also important in order to establish a community of learners. And so I hope that today's experience, like with Heather and I hope you felt respected. You know, these are some recommendations that are included on this slide. Teacher has to model and uphold the agreements, immediacy, responsiveness, routines, and academic discourse in order to create a climate of respect. So one thing that we know that you have been using in your classrooms are talk stems. Many of you use it in a face-to-face setting. So this is just a reminder to continue to use that setting. Talk stems provide a scaffold for all students to engage in academic discourse, and they also learn how to do that respectfully. It's a scaffold for struggling learners and English language learners, as they provide the context for which students will need to apply academic content with discussion. So it also really helps students to build on other people's ideas. And one of the last things I'm going to talk about, one of the first things that you really need to do initially is to create respect by making the effort to learn to say your students and to call them what they want to be called. In fact, I forgot to do this today, but you know, on Zoom, we can actually change the name in our profile to reflect what we want to be called. And so that's really important to do. It makes children feel visible, and it creates a welcoming and inclusive environment in which each person matters as an individual. Also, knowing their names and pronouncing them correctly, it will make it possible to reference people's ideas during discussion. So for example, Aria's strategy or Lisa's question. So it's really important to do that initially. And you know, getting to know our students, their backgrounds, their culture. You guys, you're being invited. Many of you that are starting virtual, you're being invited into the homes of your children, which have never had. This might be a good opportunity for you to know their culture, because you're going to see parts of their culture in these synchronous environments. Also important to model respect, but in ways to develop peer respect and responsibility. I wish I had more time with you. Our math and science department, along with assessment, we are looking to create more virtual learning opportunities in the fall, in the upcoming months. And so we want to definitely expand on some of the things that we talked about today, and go in more depth. So we hope you join us later on again when we're ready to do that. But before you leave, you use the chat feature and talk about what is one idea or strategy or tool you're excited to try this fall.